Michael, great to see you. We just looked it up. It's actually been 3 years since we had our initial discussion, which is wild to me how quickly time goes.
I know. So true. Well, hey, it's good to be with you.
What's been going on in the past 3 years, other than you've got obviously a new book, but I'm sure you've got a lot of other things going on as well. You're a man who is very, very busy. I know that.
Well, we had this thing called a pandemic, and
Yeah.
that was kind of crazy. It didn't really change our business model other than we went remote on some of our live events and then ultimately hybrid. But yeah, we've just been trucking along. Business has been doing great. So yeah, we're glad to be on what I think is the other side of it.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I think people are waking up to some realizations. And, when you talk about going remote on some live things, obviously we've done a lot of that too over the past several years. Our organization was set up to do that a lot to begin with. So the pandemic I don't usually say the pandemic. I usually say the response to the pandemic didn't really impact as much as maybe other organizations. But have you found that to be eye-opening, the way that you viewed your business in the past and how efficient things are now, knowing that we can be so productive online?
I mean, absolutely. I think, as an entrepreneur, you kind of change the way that you look at quote crises or adversities. I heard Jocko Willink speak last week, and he said as a Navy SEAL, when the guys would bring him some insurmountable problem or something that they were dealing with in combat, his first response, he just got to this point where he always said, good, because he knew that was an opportunity to develop capabilities that they didn't have.
Yeah.
And I think that's been true for us.
That's, I've Jocko is a friend of mine, and he said that to me, in fact, as I've brought up issues to him. And it's so true. And we know it's true. And yet in the midst of challenge, obviously it's very difficult. And I think that's where your book comes in handy, in the message of minding your mindset and making sure that what you're thinking and the stories that you're crafting in your head are actually the ones that are serving you.
Absolutely. Because I think the story that we tell ourselves is going to have a demonstrable impact on the results that we get. And if we're not thinking in a way that's empowering or in a way that enables us to get breakthroughs, then those things can destroy us or certainly inhibit our growth. And I think that's why the key to better results is not more action, not smarter action. It's actually the thinking that creates the action. So we got to go upstream from the results to the actions to the thinking.
I got to be really honest with you. This is such a hard concept for me. I don't disagree. I think you're right. And you've proven that you're right through your research as you laid out this book. But I'm a driver. I'm an action taker. Mm-hmm. I know you are. Most of the people who are listening to my podcast and listening to your messaging, I'm sure, are very much the same way. And I don't want to say that thinking strategically, talking about the stories is a waste of time. But I think somewhere one of the stories that I actually do tell myself is, hey, if it's not working, just do it harder.
Exactly.
And it's hard for me to step away and start thinking about thinking.
Well, let me tell you a story. And that's the big challenge. And that's the first part of the book, Mind Your Mindset, is how to identify the story, because our life is made up of stories. We are meaning-seeking people. We can't live without meaning. We can't live without stories. And even in the absence of a story, we make stuff up to try to explain the facts that we experience. So this was back during the Great Recession, about 2009, August of 2009. I had an executive coach, Eileen, to whom I dedicate the book. She would fly in and meet with me for one full day a month. And I laughingly look back on it and say it was about 75 to 80% psychotherapy, and the rest of it was business coaching. But so she comes in August of 2009. We're in the midst of the Great Recession, and we had missed our budget. I was running a public company at the time, Thomas Nelson Publishers. And so she said to me, she said, hey, how did last month, meaning July, how did it turn out? And I kind of shook my head and I said, well, not so well. She said, well, what happened? I said, well, we were about 10% short on the top line and we lost money on the bottom line. And she said, wow, I'm surprised, because when I was here a month ago, you were so confident, not only that you were going to hit the budget, but you were going to beat it. What happened? And I said, well, we're in the midst of a Great Recession. The economy's upside down, and that's had an impact on consumer confidence. In addition to that, and this was a book publishing business, I said, we're in the midst of this huge digital transformation where people are moving from print books to digital books to Kindle and all the other formats. And we're not sure what that's going to mean, how it's going to affect our margins. Everybody's a little bit uncertain right now, and that's had a measurable impact on our business. And I said, third, if that wasn't enough, third, we're trying to figure out how to use social media to sell our books, because the traditional marketing that we used to do isn't working quite in the same way. So we're kind of caught here where we can't figure it out. So she said, okay, I get that. And then she said she asked me this question. She said, what was it about your leadership that led to these results? I did not like that question at all. And in fact, I got a little bit defensive. And I said, Eileen, I just got done explaining to you the problem. And the problem is the recession, the transition from physical to digital, and the whole landscape of marketing. She said, okay, I get that, but what was it about your leadership? And I defended myself again. And then she finally said to me, she said, okay, let me ask it another way. If you could go back 30 to 45 days, would you have led differently than you did lead? What would you have done differently, knowing what you know now? And I said, oh, well, I would have met with the sales guys in a stand-up meeting every day to make sure that we were tracking towards the number we were trying to hit. She said, okay, good. What else? I said, I would have gone on that sales call to Walmart because I don't feel like we loaded in enough product. And I felt like if I had been there, I could have made a difference. Okay, what else? So I gave her like 3 to 5 things.
Sure.
And then she said, okay, so what you're telling me, it was about your leadership. And I went, oh, she got me.
Trapped.
But here's the thing, Ryan. I was thinking the problem was out there because of this story that I had created that essentially exonerated me. It wasn't my fault. And I had the problem out there instead of in here in my thinking. Once she got done with me, I realized that it was my fault. And that had a simultaneous impact on me. First, I didn't like it. I didn't like it being my fault. It was much more comfortable to blame something else, particularly something that was so outside of my control. But once I accepted responsibility for my leadership, I realized, oh, well, I can change my thinking. I can change the actions I'm taking. Now, all of a sudden, I'm empowered. I'm not just this, cork floating downstream, but I've actually got agency. And that made all the difference.
So in the story that you just shared, which is obviously powerful lessons, you explained these 3 factors that were not untrue. And I think that's where the hang up is you didn't lie to yourself. Like, you told yourself the truth. Those are the things that you said are unequivocally true. And yet it doesn't serve us, even though that's a true story. Or maybe it's true, but it's not the entire story. Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, well, I would say it this way, and we get into this in the book in great detail, but we have to separate what happened from the meaning that we assign to what happened. So what was true, was there a recession? Yes.
Right.
We knew exactly what it was. Was there a measurable impact on consumer confidence? Yes. In fact, I quoted the numbers to Eileen, and I quoted them to my board of directors a few days before Eileen showed up. Was there a measurable impact from marketing, all these things? Yes, those were the facts. Unfortunately, kind of like Lego blocks, you could build, a Millennial Falcon full size out of Legos, or you could build, a dumpster truck that was a small thing your kid could do. Same building blocks, completely different results. And so I had created a story out of that same fact set that said it wasn't my fault. I'm the victim, and just being harsh, but I was the victim in the story. All these things were outside of my control, and I was being acted upon. Or I could knit together this story that basically said, yeah, those exist, but in any kind of economy where there's a lot of churn and a lot of upheaval, there are winners and losers, and I'm going to be a winner. And I need to take control of what I can take control of. And that's enough. Can I tell you another quick story?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I have a friend, Dan, who grew up Mennonite. And As an adult, he said, and he's a speaker, and he said, so here's the story. He said, I grew up in this very religiously oppressive environment. We had no technology. We had no television. We didn't even have a radio. My parents were very strict. We weren't allowed to go really outside the community. All my friends were within the community. And it was just boring. And I didn't feel equipped to really meet the challenges of life because I was ensconced in that community. Or I grew up in this amazing, tight-knit community where my parents spent an enormous amount of time with us. We weren't distracted with technology. We would play board games in the evenings or have these amazing conversations. Our neighbors were always there for us. We were always there for them. We knew our neighbors. And it was an amazing community. And I feel like that really equipped me to be the person I've become today.
Interesting.
Same fact set, two different stories.
Yeah. It reminds me of the anecdote of and I've heard different versions, but the two brothers, one is an alcoholic and a drug addict and a criminal and has had a horrible life. And the other one's successful and he's got a beautiful family and he's wealthy. And somebody asked one brother, how have you done this? And he says, well, my dad was an alcoholic and abusive and all of these things. And so I didn't want to be like that. And they asked the other brother, and the brother said, well, my dad was abusive and alcoholic and I turned out just like him.
Yeah. I mean, perfect. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
So what type of litmus test do you run your narratives and your stories through to determine whether or not they're serving you? Because I think we have human beings in general have a very good ability to trick ourselves into believing the stories that we tell ourselves, whether they are accurate or not. So what series of tests or questions do you run yourself through to make sure that you're telling yourself the right story to produce the right result?
Well, I think for a lot of people, it's a big step to get to the point where they are aware that there's a story that's running things behind the scenes. And so I think whenever you're frustrated, whenever you're angry, whenever you're not getting the results in your business or your personal life, it's important to just stop, push the pause button and say, wait a second, what is the story that I'm telling to myself right now? And we're making that up in real time to explain the facts of our existence. And we have to ask ourselves the question, is there another way to tell that story? And we have to interrogate the story. And that's the second part of the book, Mind Your Mindset, is to interrogate the story. So identifying that there is a story and realizing that inside of our head lives this narrator. And that's what we call him in the book. And the narrator sounds suspiciously like us. Same voice, everything. We just think it's our thinking. But it's like somebody's living inside of our head. And much like if you were to watch a football game and there's, the color commentators that are telling you what's happening on the field, that's the facts.
Sure.
But they're telling you what it means. If they don't begin to pick up the pace and really, complete this drive, the team's going to fall behind and there's probably no way they can recover. Somebody's telling you a story and that person we call the narrator. So what is the narrator saying? And one of the most helpful exercises you can do is just write down on a sheet of paper, what are the sentences in my head? What is the narrator telling me? So back in 1992, I'd had a business for about 5 years. The business had been doing great. We've been growing like crazy. We had 3 full-time salespeople. It happened to be a book publishing business. And we said, if we could just get into a distribution relationship with a larger publishing company where they had a bigger sales team, we could really exponentially increase our sales. I mean, if we could do what we've done with 3 salespeople, what would happen if we got in a distribution relationship? So we signed a contract with a distributor, and that distributor never came close to what we were doing as a small, highly focused company. And so that put us in a situation where we began to experience, for the first time, negative cash flow. That same company lent us money in order to meet our financial obligations, believing that they were going to catch up, and it was kind of like a sales advance and we'd make the money back. Long story short, we essentially went bankrupt. And it was humiliating. I was embarrassed. I was discouraged. I wanted to quit. I had a lot of thoughts. Well, then about 2 years later, a friend of mine, hearing that story, said to me, he said, you're not very good with money, are you?
Hmm.
Well, I kind of just took that as the truth. And I adopted his opinion based on a story that I told him and very little evidence. I just adopted that story. I'm not very good with money. So I spent the next 10 years proving that I wasn't very good with money, because that
Right.
was the story that I believed. And it wasn't until I began to interrogate, well, first of all, become aware of that story and say, wait a second, that's a story in my head. Have there been times where I've made good financial decisions? Yes.
Of
Well,
course.
why have I chosen not to focus on that? Why do I only focus on the things that I've screwed up? Because that made me hesitant. It made me nervous about anything related to financial stuff. And it wasn't until I interrogated the story and said, okay, look, I can learn about money. I can become better at managing money. The people that do this well are not any smarter than I am. They've just applied themselves to learn about money. And that empowered me. And then I got pretty good at it.
Yeah. Well, I like this concept of the narrator. I'm thinking about it when you were talking about commentators with sports. There's certain commentators that we naturally gravitate to or we like more than others. And I'm thinking about this narrator that we have in our heads. And there's certain narrators that we like. And I think more often than not, I like the narrator that excuses away my behavior. I don't like the narrator that says, no, this is your fault. So I have to be aware of that. It was interesting. I was having I won't say heated, but a tense conversation with my wife this morning, and she had brought some things to my attention, and I immediately went into defense mode. And within a matter of, I would say, 10 to 20 seconds, fortunately, I realized what I was doing and stopped and said, you know what? In my mind first, yeah, what she's saying is unequivocally true. It is accurate. And turned from the defensive narrator to okay, you're right. What can I now do to improve my behavior or the situation moving forward?
Right.
I can't say that happens all the time. More often than not, it doesn't. But fortunately, in this instant, it worked out well.
Yeah. And I mean, the real challenge is to be able to take the moment in real time and stop reacting. Ask yourself the question, what's really going on here? And then begin to proactively do the right thing. And again, I don't think it's that easy. It takes some work, and we give you some hooks in the book to do that. But another story, I've taken really good care of myself in terms of nutrition, in terms of eating, in terms of fitness and all that. I've had a trainer for over a decade, a nutritionist.
You look great, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you.
You look lean, you look fit, you've got the beard going on, so you look great.
Well, thank you. But I had a heart attack in September.
Oh, wow.
And thankfully, it was a mild heart attack, didn't kill me. So I'll consider that a mild heart attack. But and there was no damage. But when they got in there and they started examining, they did an angiogram, and they said, buddy, you're about 90% blocked in one artery. We're going to have to do bypass surgery. When they first saw me, they said, you look so healthy. Probably at the most, you're going to need a stent, but probably not even that. What I didn't realize at the time was like 67% of men who have a first-time heart attack are asymptomatic. And most of it's related to genetics. Could I have done different things previously? Yes, I could have if I had known what I know now, because precision medicine makes it possible to turn on and off genes. But I didn't know that at the time. And so I had some calcium buildup that I didn't know about. So anyway, fast forward. After you have cardiac surgery, they put you into cardiac rehab so that you can begin to exercise again, but so that you're monitored and you don't experience some negative thing. So part of that is education. So we're sitting around a table. I'm sitting around with 7 other people that are in cardiac rehab. And the nurse says to us, she says, what does your heart attack mean to you? Well, first of all, that is a great question, because there's the fact of the heart attack. Right. And then there's what we assign as the meaning of the heart attack. So the guy directly across from me, he says to me, and he was a little bit older than I am, he answers the question. He said, well, I'll tell you what it means for me. My life's pretty much over. From this point forward, it's a continued descent until I die. And I'm just kind of managing the decline. And I went, wow.
Yeah.
And so I had a doctor in Los Angeles that I deal with through Zoom that's a peptide therapist. I've been dealing with him for a couple of years. He calls me in the hospital. And he says to me, he said, look, I know your medical profile inside and out because I'm one of your doctors. And he said, there's really nothing else you could have done. But he said, I want you to remember this. The past is the past. You can't fix it. You can't change it. It's behind you. Here's the good news. You've got the rest of your life in front of you, and you have never been in better shape than you are right now.
Mm-hmm.
You've got better blood flow than you've ever had. You're in great health. You're going to recover quickly. And he said, you're going to go above and beyond what you were doing before, because he said, you're going to even be more motivated now. So like he was giving me a completely different story, and very different from the guy that was sitting across the table from me. You know, if you think that this is the beginning of the end, that it's going to be a low or a slow, long decline till you die, then what's the point of eating good? You know, let's bring on the fried chicken and the cheeseburgers.
Might as well enjoy it on the way out.
Might as well enjoy it because there's nothing you can do. Me, on the other hand, based on what my doctor told me and the story that he gave me, which I adopted, I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to really take even extra good care of myself, because I realize the value of health now more than I ever have.
Well, and imagine what it would have been, how much more severe it would have been, or earlier these issues would have arisen had you not been in shape.
Yes.
And I got to say, I'm impressed, because I know plenty of CEOs of large organizations and companies that do not take their health as seriously as it appears that you do. And they excuse it away. Like, I'm busy and I've got this and I don't have time for this. And what an unfortunate and tragic situation. But I'd also suggest, and I'm learning this over my own health journey, specifically, even over the past couple of months, you know, how radically different I feel and how much more productive I am and how much more fulfilled I am in just seemingly insignificant moments. Like, the health aspect is something so many people overlook, especially a lot of very, very successful people in their own right excuse that away.
I was speaking for a bank yesterday, and it was all their clients in the room, and you know, they were pretty successful people. They were business owners, CEOs, C-suite executives. And I said, the reason why you're not making time for your health, and this is the story they're telling themselves, is you've convinced yourself that the situation you're in right now is temporary. That's the story you're telling yourself. And I said, trust me, I've been there. I've lied to myself and I've lied to my wife, because I've said things like, well, you know, I'm in a new position, and once I get acclimated, then I'll be able to get the balance back and give you and the kids the time you need and deserve.
Sure.
But then about that time, you know, I have somebody resign, and I say, honey, you know, right now I'm working 2 jobs. As soon as I get this position filled, I'll give you and the kids the time you need and you deserve. And you go from one temporary situation to another temporary situation. And before you know it, that temporary situation has become permanent. And that's when you get into trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to go back to the concept of the narrator. What is the value in having this narrator as almost an external rather than your own voice? Did you deliberately look at it like that? Is there information that you came across that makes that more effective? What's your reasoning behind that?
Yeah, the reason behind it is because I think it helps objectify the thinking, because we get kind of caught up in this sort of subjective quagmire where we really don't know what's true and what we're making up. And when we create this narrator, because the way that the narrator shows up is that there's these sentences in our head. He says very specific things like, you know, Ryan, you're not very good with money, or Ryan, you're never going to be in the same shape you were in your 20s, or whatever it may be. But I just think it helps to objectify and identify that there's this narration that's going on in my head that, in fact, can be adjusted. You know, the narrator can be enormously helpful when we partner with the narrator for our benefit. It's only when the narrator is there sabotaging us. And part of the job of the narrator is to keep us safe. This is part of what's happened through evolution. The narrator wants to keep us in the comfort zone, wants to keep us from, getting too far outside of that where there is danger. And the narrator wants to protect us from that danger. And so, once we can recognize that, we realize that there's a whole world that opens up to us if we can change the perspective of the narrator. And that's really what the book is about, is taking control of your mindset.
So then what are some ways that you can begin to understand the motive of the narrator, which is to preservation first and foremost, right?
Yep.
Like, hey, don't go out and start a business because that's risky. You're risking your livelihood. You're putting your family at risk. There's all sorts of things. Don't go work out, because if you do, you might get injured and you're not ready for that. And then you can't do other things that are important to you. There's all sorts of things we tell ourselves. So how do we understand the motive of the narrator? And then also, I think you cover in the book, I can't remember what you termed it. I believe it was separating fact from fiction, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
So how do you begin to do that?
Well, I think that, that's where we've got to get into making sure that we understand some of the ways that we think. For example, there's a way that we think that X means this. That, for example, if I go through a bankruptcy, it means I'm not very good with money. Or it may mean that if sales are down this last month, like this is what I've feared, and it's now coming to pass. This is going to prove that I don't know what I'm doing. Whatever. Or Megan tells a story in the book, and I wrote this book with my oldest daughter, Megan, who's the CEO of our company, Full Focus. And she tells the story about learning to speak publicly. She had this terrible fear. Like if she went to her church and they were making the rounds inside of a small group where everybody was reading from a book or something, she would break out in hives just at the thought of having to read something to a small group of 7 or 8. And what she found is that story became very confining to her. And she knew as a CEO, which she wasn't yet, but was about to become, that she was going to be asked to speak more and more publicly. But as she chased that narrative back, she realized that when she was in high school, her best friend, when they were juniors in high school, had to stand up in front of the class and give a speech, and just kind of blanked out, got embarrassed, began to cry, and ran out of the room into the restroom. And Megan said, that will never happen to me because I will never speak publicly. I'm just not going to do it. And so then all of a sudden, fast forward several years, now she's the COO of our company. And my team comes to her and says, hey, we're doing this big conference called the Achieve Conference, and we want you to be one of the keynote speakers. Well, now she was too embarrassed to say no, but she was scared to death.
Yes.
Because, and this is back to your point, how do you figure out, what's the narration, what's the fact from the fiction? The story that she was telling herself is public speaking equals death. If I speak publicly, then it's an existential crisis for me. There's something so fundamental that's threatened that I'm just going to avoid that situation at all costs, except that now she couldn't. And so she didn't get control of this story and change it. It was, her career was going to go nowhere. And so she called upon a speech coach, and, she hired a speech coach. She hired a therapist. They really worked hard on it. And she spoke in front of 800 people and killed it. But she had to change the narrative, and she had to realize that X doesn't always mean Y. Public speaking doesn't always mean death or existential threat. It can mean opening up additional opportunities, getting new clients, making an impact on more people, all those things. And so that's now her story. I mean, she speaks all the time publicly and does phenomenal at it. So part of separating the facts from the fiction is realizing that X doesn't always equal Y. There's another one too, and we talk about 4 or 5 of these in the book, but there's a fundamental difference between correlation and causation. Just because something didn't happen, or because something did happen at the same time, doesn't mean X caused Y. So one of the things we talk about in the book is that there's a high correlation in the summer between shark attacks and ice cream sales.
Sure.
Now,
right.
Does it mean that ice cream sales cause shark attacks?
No, of course not.
maybe makes you more tasty to the sharks.
Right. A little
You
more
eat ice
sweet.
cream. No, that just happens to be correlation. It's summer. Ice cream sales are going to go up in the summer. Shark
Right.
attacks are going to
So
go
it's
up
the
in the summer.
beach.
It's the
Sure.
beach. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, separating that is enormously helpful too. But we've got several little hacks like that, how you can separate the fact. But typically a fact is the kind of thing that's going to appear in a police report. It's objective, it's verifiable, it's something you can write down that if you had two different observers, they would agree this is the fact. But then when you start talking about what it means, you have extraordinary divergence there. Because again, people are assembling the facts into a narrative that may be very different from another person who is observing the same facts.
Yeah, I'm reminded of this. I'm occasionally, I might be downstairs doing some crafts or drawing or painting or doing something with my children, and we have all the same tools at our disposal. But it's amazing how many different paintings we can an infinite number of ways to put the mediums together to create whatever it is we're going to create. And I think that illustrates the point too. Is it's not the fact, it's what you do with it. Like your daughter, where she said, I will never let that happen to me again because I'm never going to speak in public, or I'm never going to let that happen again because I am going to be more prepared. I actually had a very, very similar story to your daughter.
Really?
And yeah, very strikingly similar. I was in 8th grade and got up. I was on a leadership council or something like that, and got up and went to all of the leadership council members were going to say their little part. And I completely froze, and somebody came in and rescued me and saved me. And I was mortified of it. So it's interesting. It's very, that one hits home.
I had a similar experience, and this wasn't that long ago. This was probably 10 or 12 years ago, just as I was starting this company and really ramping up my speaking. And I would sweat so profusely before I got on stage that I got into the habit, and this is embarrassing to admit, I would wear 2 t-shirts, hoping that I didn't sweat through 2 and make it obvious that I was scared to death. And it was my relationship with adrenaline. And when I would begin to feel butterflies in my stomach, or my pulse would rise, or my hands would begin to sweat, then I thought that was a negative thing, that there must be something fundamentally wrong with me, and therefore I shouldn't be a speaker. And it caused me to be hesitant when I spoke. I wasn't confident when I got on stage. And then I started to tell myself a different story about adrenaline. And so now what I say, like I said, I spoke yesterday, I spoke last week. And typically what I say now is when I feel those same things, I say to myself, oh, that's my body's way of preparing for peak performance. And so I welcome it. I love the adrenaline, because with adrenaline, you think faster, you think better, things occur to you in real time that wouldn't occur to you otherwise. You're hyper vigilant, hyper aware of what's going on in the environment, which enables me to connect with the audience better. All those things are good, but it's just a story.
Yeah.
The facts are the same. My hands still sweat before I get up, not as bad as they used to, because I know I'm going to make it through it. But that's just part of the drill, and that's how my body prepares itself for peak performance, and that's a good thing.
It's interesting because you can, through your mindset, based on what you're saying, paint a different story. And I don't even think the story has to be true. As long as you believe it, then your body is going to physiologically respond to that. You said it. You sweat less now. Yeah. Because the story isn't as negative or scary as it once was. And so in a way, it's self-fulfilling prophecy either way.
It's really true. Ryan, one of the best ways that we can get access to is to listen to our own language. And sometimes this is the real value of having an executive coach or somebody that can come alongside us and listen to our language and point out to us, what we're thinking based on the language we're using. I'll give you a concrete example. So not too long after I started this business, I was speaking a lot. I was at one point I was speaking 70, 80 times a year, which for me would be a lot. So I remember I just sat down on the airplane. We were still at the gate, and my phone rings, and it was one of my best friends. And he said, "Hey, what's up?" And I said, "Well, I'm on my way to San Diego because I have to speak at an event in San Diego tomorrow." Pause. He says, "Wait a second. I just want to challenge you on something." He said, "You're going to San Diego, right?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "That has like the best climate on the planet. and the best fish tacos on the planet. And I know you love fish tacos. I said, that's true. And he said, for as long as I've known you, you said you wanted to be a public speaker and you wanted to get paid a lot of money for it. And now you're doing it. You're living the dream. So you don't have to do anything. Nobody held a gun to your head. You get to do something. Well, the language of having to do something is the language of obligation and duty and something that physiologically, I'm just like, I got to go do this thing. Versus I get to go do this. I mean, that totally changed my physiology and the way I experience it. I'm thinking like, yeah, I get to go to San Diego. I get to speak. I'm living the dream. Totally different perspective.
Yeah. I've thought that way with the word can't as it relates to obligations or requests for my time or attention. So somebody might say, hey, Ryan, send me an email. Hey, Ryan, can you join me on my podcast? And my old language was, I can't, I'm sorry. Unfortunately, I have other things. Well, none of that is accurate. I can, I'm not sorry. And it's not unfortunate that I'm busy doing other things. And yet I was lying to this individual by saying, I can't, I'm sorry. It's unfortunately, I'm doing something else. Instead, I now say, I have placed my priorities in these other projects, so I will not commit to that right now. And that's the truth. That's the reality. And I think that's more fair to other people, but it also helps me understand that I'm conscious about the choices I'm making and where I want to invest my time and energy.
Well, and if your experience is anything like mine, because I do a similar kind of thing, I basically say, hey, this sounds like a great event. Thank you so much for thinking of me. Due to my other commitments, I have to say no.
Yes.
Or in order to be faithful to my other commitments, I have to say no. Well, everybody respects that. I've never had anybody, say to me like, well, you just need to overcommit and do this thing I'm asking you to do.
Right. Well, I also don't think we make these types of promises to people because I don't want to let people down. I want to serve. I don't want to let other people down. I want to help them. But I've also come to realize that if I do overcommit or commit to something I'm not really all that interested in doing, that I'm going to show up in an inferior way and I'll end up reducing the quality of service that I might give to that person and my other obligations that I've committed to.
Yeah, totally. And I think this is the essence of leadership, because real leadership begins with self-leadership. And if we can't lead ourselves, and this whole thing about managing our mindset is an issue of self-leadership, if we can't lead ourselves, we're really not capable of leading other people well. And I'm the most difficult person I have to lead. Getting me to do the things I know that I need to do. That's the biggest challenge. That's pretty much a full-time job for me. And I think for most people.
Well, I think it's because we know how to get ourselves out of things that we don't want to do because we're so intimately familiar with all our little cues and triggers and little hacks and all of this kind of stuff.
Yeah, no doubt. This whole issue of language is so interesting. You may have seen this game. I don't know if you saw this game between the Colts and the Vikings this fall. Greatest comeback in football or in NFL history. Did you watch that game?
I don't watch football, so I didn't see it.
Well, I didn't used to watch it until this last year. I have a grandson that's playing football, and so we've gone all in.
Oh, it's awesome.
Football. Yeah, it's been really fun.
Look, I have nothing against it. It's just I don't watch it, so I don't know much about it.
It's a huge time commitment, for starters.
No doubt.
But this game just happened maybe about a month ago, maybe about 6 weeks ago. But at halftime, the Colts led the Vikings 33-0. And it would be easy to think as you go into the locker room at the half, 33-0, you're behind 33-0. It'd be easy to think the game's over. What's the use? Let's just kind of go through the motions. The fans are out there, so we got to look like we're making an effort. But essentially, you've resigned yourself to the inevitable. You're going to lose the game, right? Nobody has ever come back from that big of a deficit, not in the history of professional football. So Patrick Peterson, who is a cornerback for the Vikings, he walks in. This is not the coach. This is a cornerback. He walks into the locker room and he says this: "We only need 5 touchdowns to win this game."
Only.
And they won it. But it blew the hair back on the coach because he was like, what? Even the coach had fallen into the narrative that the game is over. Why try?
Yeah.
But not this cornerback. This cornerback, Patrick, from his perspective, and the word only is telling, we only need 5 touchdowns. We can do this. And they did it.
And they won. They scored the 5, or they score even more?
They scored even more. It ended up being like 30. I think the final score was like 39-36.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Yeah, I'll have to go check that out. I'm curious about your take on the concept of labels. I think so often we put labels on ourselves. I'm this, I'm fat, I'm lazy, I'm an alcoholic, I'm a this, I'm a that. And I don't think our labels are usually good. I don't hear too many people saying, I'm a champion, I'm a winner, I'm somebody who. We don't do that. We always equate negativity with our labels. Have you done much on that, or delved into the idea of labels, and what would be a more appropriate way to address inadequacies and shortcomings than labeling something that's, finite and concrete?
Well, labels, and we do talk about this in the book, but labels are really important because how we define ourselves, our fundamental sense of identity, our behavior is going to flow from that, just like it flows from our thinking. Because all our identity is a collection of thoughts about who we are. That same executive coach who said to me, what was it about your leadership that led to these results? I was in another conversation with her, probably a year later. And somehow we got talking about introverts and extroverts. And I said, well, I took that Myers-Briggs test, and I'm really an introvert. And she said, well, what does that mean to you? Okay, so now I've got a label. I'm an introvert.
Right.
She says, what does that mean to you? I said, well, if I'm honest, I don't like meeting new people. I don't like being around a lot of people. I enjoy spending time by myself. I need a lot of recovery time if I'm around people. And to be honest, I kind of avoid people. She said, well, how's that working for you? I kind of laughed and I said, well, she said, after all, you're a CEO of a publicly held company. And I would think that you have to meet a lot of people. And I said, I really do. And she said, what if this was just a label? Like if you decided you were an extrovert, or let's say you got the test results back and they were different than you thought, and it labeled you as an extrovert, what would that thinking look like? And what would that behavior look like? I said, well, I think if I were an extrovert, I would enjoy meeting new people. I would love engaging with people. And yeah, I would just enjoy it. She said, well, what if you tried that? Like for 30 days, you just decided, hey, look, I'm going to be an extrovert. And she says, I get that there's probably a fundamental wiring and maybe you need to take more recovery time. But what would it make possible if you labeled yourself as an extrovert? Well, my head exploded, because what that would mean is that when I walk into a room, I wouldn't be kind of the shrinking violet that doesn't go up and introduce himself to people, but I would be aggressive in terms of going up to people, engaging them in conversation. And I might even be better at it because I would be informed by sort of the introversion side as well. And I realized it was just a collection of thoughts. Now, again, fundamentally, I think you can make a case that there are introverts and extroverts, but this is the thing she said, when the label begins to limit your freedom, it's no longer serving you.
Interesting. Yeah, it takes away some of your what was the word that you used earlier? I was
agency, maybe?
Agency. It was agency. That's the word.
Yeah, because I'm thinking all the things I can't do. And again, all the excuses for why I am the way I am, as opposed to saying, it's just a way of thinking. And I can adopt that way of thinking for the sake of the result I'm trying to create.
Yeah, good point. I mean, so one of the things that I've been doing lately is there's this question that I've scripted and that continues to run through my mind. And it's, what is the man that what would the man I want to be do?
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's kind of like, you see the WWJD, what would Jesus do? It's like that, it's what would the man I want to be do in this instance? And I had a small funny one this morning. I got back from the gym, and that was a challenge because I woke up this morning. I'm like, I don't want to go to the gym. I've been pretty consistent. I'm going to hit snooze. And I was like, okay, well, what would the better Ryan do in this case? He would get up, he would go to the gym. So I went to the gym, and then I get home, and I enter through the side barn door, and I come in the house, and the first room is our laundry room. And that's where we put the dogs. Occasionally we lock them in the laundry room if we have to, go run errands or whatever. So they spend some time in there. And I saw a milk dud carton that the dog had got out of the trash and chewed up a little bit. And I walked in, I saw it. It was right there on the floor. And I walked right over it. I took 2 or 3 steps right over it. And I'm like, I stopped in the doorway of the next room. And I'm like, okay, what would the Ryan that you want to be do? And I turned around and I took 20 seconds. I cleaned it up, threw it in the trash. And I know that's silly. I know it sounds stupid, but it is significant when you start stacking those types of little actions together based on a version of the man that you want to be and what that person would do.
Well, and I think what you just illustrated there is that if you want to change your behavior and change the results, it's got to begin with your thinking. And you created a little hack to change your thinking in those moments. I've asked my clients a similar question when they're faced with some really difficult decision, like they're going to let somebody go. And I'd say, okay, how can you do this in a way that 10 years from now, looking back on it, you'll feel proud of the way that you did?
Powerful.
So again, it's a way of accessing our thinking and changing our thinking about something so we can change our actions so we can get a different result. There's only so much you can do through brute force. And believe me, I'm a fan of hard work. I'm a fan of working harder. I'm a fan of more focus and being more productive. But there's only so far you can get with that. It's the thinking that creates the breakthrough. It's the thinking that creates the exponentially different results.
I love the concept. I think what you're talking about here is conscious thought, right? We can project ourselves out into the future or to a different place and time and give ourselves a perspective that we don't currently have. And I've been thinking a lot about, just because of my own personal experiences. And then of course the guys that I work with, I see a lot of despair in men. I see a lot of depression and anxiety and even suicidal thoughts. And then in other men, I see, a lot of hope and optimism, even if they're in a difficult situation. And I think conscious thought is what gives us hope, because we have the ability to project ourselves to a better place in time than we might be today. And if we can't exercise that, we're humans, we should be. And if we don't exercise that consciousness, then we stay stuck where we are, which might be really hard for a lot of guys right now. Maybe they're in bankruptcy. Maybe it's health issues, like the gentleman in your
rehab. Yeah.
Rehab. Yes. Or going through a relational breakup. It's like, have some hope by thinking about how the future might be better, which I think leads us to different behaviors that will fulfill those prophecies for us.
No doubt. And I think this is the real value of community. Because I think when we go through difficult times, it's really tempting to isolate ourselves and be left alone with our own thoughts. And then it's just us versus the narrator. But if we have a small group, a band of brothers, a group of guys that can encourage us and with whom we can be truly authentic and honest, it makes all the difference in the world. We talk about this in the book because, Jim Rohn said, and everybody quotes this, but, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And scientifically, that's true. The people that you choose, I don't know if it's 5 or if it's 7 or whatever, but the people that we choose to be around and the way they think makes all the difference. This is why it's so important for people that are trying to build a company or for people that are running a company to pay attention to the culture, because the culture affects the thinking, and the culture is that unseen force that drives operating results. So if you get that right, if it's toxic, it's going to lead to bad results. If it's positive, where people are empowering and encouraging one another, and people are saying what maybe the narrator won't say, and that is, you can do this, then all of a sudden we begin to believe and the narrator begins to change his tone.
Yeah. And I think the narrator is naturally brutal. Like, you're watching a football game and you see the commentator and he's like, well, in this situation, I would have done X, Y, and Z. And it's like, let's see you get on the field and execute flawlessly. But then in our own minds, we beat ourselves up. You're a loser. You hurt these people. You hurt yourself. You're no good. You're not worth it. That's brutal. And that's what we're listening to on a daily, hourly basis.
I know. It's so true. I I had somebody the other day, I was talking to a coaching client, and as their screensaver, they had a picture of them as a little boy. And
Mm,
it was a reminder to be kind to themselves. Like, would you say this to that little boy?
yeah.
You know, and I thought that's really good. Because I think if we objectify it, we wouldn't allow anybody to talk to us the way that the
Of
narrator
course.
talks to us. You know, we wouldn't put up with it. We get new friends. But I think we sometimes don't differentiate and see that really is a voice, and we can force them to change. And it may seem very rote initially, but to, you know, if the narrator is saying, you know, you're not very good with money, say, no, here's what you're going to say. I'm going to give you a script to say from now on. And the script is going to be, I'm getting better with money, or I'm learning to manage my money well, or whatever it is. I mean, it doesn't have to be woo-woo, doesn't have to be
Sure.
way out there. It just has to be a different story. And if you really want to get fancy, you can actually record those as a series of affirmations. And there's an app that I love called Think Up. And I have no connection with the company. I don't know the people or whatever. I just use it. But you record these affirmations in the app, and then you can play them back like in a loop with a music bed, all kinds of things. But
Interesting.
because it's in your own voice, the science shows that it slips into your subconscious more easily because you trust yourself. And when you hear yourself saying it, it goes into your subconscious, and then you begin to believe it over time.
Wow, that's interesting. You know, early in my financial planning practice in another life, I would get down on myself because I wasn't producing the results that I wanted. And I created an email folder for testimonials from people. And so if somebody would send me an email and it would say, hey, Ryan, we just really appreciate your help, or here's what we did, or we paid off the car, or we retired, or we took a family vacation, I would store it in that email folder. And then if I was having a bad day or something didn't work right, I would pull up those emails and I would just look through those emails. And it was amazing how quickly it elevated my spirits and caused me to get my head back in the game and get back after it.
So good. Because that
Yeah.
becomes sort of a proxy for the narrator, right? It's another voice that's speaking into your life, that because it's, you know, it's more than one, and because there's a chorus of people that are supporting you, and this is the effective community, then you believe what you couldn't believe if you were just left to your own devices.
Yeah. The exercise about when you were talking about what you're telling yourself, imagine telling that to someone else. I've got a friend, he came on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. I think you'd actually hit it off with him. His name is Brett Bartholomew.
Hmm.
And he shared an exercise that he does with his team and also his coaching clients. And he'll have men or his clients, men or women, think about the negative scripts that are running through their heads and the things that they're telling themselves. And he'll pair people up and he'll say, write all those scripts out. So the individuals write the scripts out. And then he says, now take that and I want you to read it as if you're saying it to the person sitting across the table from you.
That's good.
And inevitably the people are like, I can't say this. This is mean. I can't say this to this person. Like, I'm not going to hurt this person that way. And it just crystallizes how we talk to ourselves.
Yeah, it's really true. And how sometimes we're unfair with ourselves. And if we can just learn to be more kind, and again, take control of that narration and change our mindset, we're going to get better results. We're going to make a bigger impact in the world.
Yeah. You talked a little bit about the concept of a brotherhood and having men in your corner. Is this the idea of more brains? I was intrigued by that. Having more brains is better, I think, is what you said
Yes.
in the book. So explain that. Walk me through that.
Well, anytime you can get divergent thinking and more perspectives, there are people that are going to be able to see things in you that you can't see in yourself. And they're going to be able to appreciate and see, you know, the benefits, the positive characteristics. And that's just really all I mean. There's just, we're not always the most objective source of truth. We need other people to kind of give us a perspective of reality that we can't see for ourselves.
Are there specific things you're looking for in those other brains? Because you don't want to let everybody in. Like, that wouldn't be prudent. So are there things that you're looking for?
Yeah, I definitely want people that have a positive outlook on life, that don't have a negative view of adversity, that see it as an opportunity, that are willing to be supportive and other-centered enough to encourage people, so that they're going to be for me, and for me getting better results, and not people that are going to be threatened by my success, but people that are going to celebrate it with me. And that's the value of getting, I mean, we do this in our group coaching program. Anytime you get a bunch of entrepreneurs or business owners or guys together that have that, you can create the culture for them or with them that maybe they're just not getting in the company that they work for or with.
Yeah. That's a good point. I think one of the things I've been aware of too is, we have a lot of guys who are like, well, I want to find men like that. Like I want men like that in my corner. I just don't know where to start. And I would suggest that you write those things down. It's apparently you've thought about it, and be that, like, you be that guy first.
Yes, totally.
Because then you're going to attract those types of people. But maybe you might say you want positive people in your life, but if you're a negative person, what positive person is going to want to be around you?
You won't attract it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Be the person. I say this to people who say, well, I just don't have any friends. Well, be the friend you wish you had. And describe that friend and now become that person, just as you said, Ryan.
Yeah. Michael, I appreciate you. I enjoy our conversations. I think I told you last time, man, I have been following you for years and years. I've got your books. In fact, one of the things that really helped me of yours was how to write a book proposal. I don't know if I told you that.
No, you didn't.
Yeah.
That goes way
back.
How
to write a book. Way back. And it was how to write a book proposal. And I actually ended up, my first book, I self-published. My second book, I was offered through a literary agent. So I didn't have to go out and pitch anything, which was nice, but it helped me with the process of writing the book to have that book proposal done. So I got to tell you, man, just to be able to have these conversations from somebody I really respect and have used your information is good for me. I'm really grateful.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing that.
Can you tell the guys where to connect with you to learn more about coaching, and then obviously pick up a copy of Mind Your Mindset?
Yeah. So my main website is fullfocus.co, and you can learn more about our coaching program there. We have a business coaching program called Business Accelerator. Also have a website for that, businessaccelerator.com. But for the book, it's at mindyourmindsetbook.com. And let me tell you why people need to go there, is because when you buy the book from any major retailer and come back with your receipt to mindyourmindsetbook.com, you'll get over $500 worth of free bonuses, including the audiobook. So don't buy the audiobook, even if that's what you intend to listen to. We'll give it to you for free. Also a course, the Mind Your Mindset course. And then this amazing tool that we have that's kind of like a legal pad where you rip off the pages, but it's called the self-coaching tool, so that you can walk yourself through the process of identifying your story, interrogating your story, and imagining a better story. And it just walks you through that process whenever you feel stuck.
Excellent. We're going to sync it all up so the guys know where to go. Last question. I see some guitars over your right shoulder there, I believe. What you obviously play. What's your favorite type of music?
I would say probably, I live in Nashville, Tennessee, but probably singer-songwriter kind of music. To get even more narrow, I love what we call in Nashville newgrass. It's like bluegrass, but it's sort of the modern version of that. Nickel Creek would be a good example.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm familiar with them. Okay, cool. Well, good. Well, thanks again, Michael. I appreciate you, and I wish you all the success that you deserve. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having me on.